They're planning in Washington right now to write more regulations on the financial system. Of course, that's what they always do. They did it in the Depression. After Enron failed, they came and wrote the bill called Sarbanes-Oxley. And now, because of the financial crisis and all the mistakes that they've made in the system of the spending and the borrowing and the inflating, they believe that it's all been caused because the government hasn't regulated your economic activities enough, and that is what they're planning. It won't work. It won't work. It will cause more taxes, more spending, more bureaucracy, more debt. So we can expect that this problem in the economic situation isn't going to go away. It's going to get a lot worse. We live in very historic times right now. Historic times because I am personally convinced that the financial crisis that we're in the midst of and that presented itself here just a couple of years ago is the biggest financial crisis in the history of mankind. That the bubble was bigger than ever. It was based on the dollar standard, and we're in the midst of it, but we're not even nearly halfway through this. It's going to get a lot worse because they haven't changed one thing. They haven't decided that we need less government. The solution to the problems that we have today can be found in less government and following the Constitution. Means a little bit more to me in a personal way because I remember a speech given on August 15th, 1971 by Richard Nixon. And that was a speech that we knew we were having problems, and it was on a Sunday night, and he ran off all these things he was about to do to us. But he decided that there would be a big tax on all imports. He decided that we had to have wage and price controls, and he also decided that we no longer could defend the dollar. The dollar would be de-linked for gold, and it has been ever since. It was the end of the pseudo-gold standard of called the Bretton Woods standard. Now that made an impression on me. It had been during the 1960s and late 70s. I had come across Austrian economics and studied the business cycle from that perspective. And the end of Bretton Woods was predicted all along. When that happened, I just knew at that time that the economists who taught Austrian economics were correct. And that is when I decided that I would enter politics for the sole purpose not of running with the idea that I could ever win an office, because that was the furthest from my imagination. I thought if I could run for Congress, I would at least have a little bit of an opportunity to talk about the insanities of what we were doing in Washington. And it turned out that my wife was a little more perspective on this, because when I told her, she said it was dangerous to do this, and why could it be dangerous? And she said, well, you could end up getting elected. But I assured her that would be an impossibility, because I wasn't going to be running as Santa Claus. But her answer was that, well, you'll be telling the truth, and maybe they're ready to hear the truth. But today we're witnessing an historic monetary event as well. It's not as precise as August 15, 1971, but I would say for the last 12 to 15 months, what the world has come to realize, and that is those on our side and those who are on the opposite side, have come to recognize that the dollar reserve standard that replaced the Bretton Woods Agreement has now ended. And And that is why the house of cards has collapsed, and that is why they will not rebuild the financial structures of the world based on the dollar standard. When our Secretary of Treasury can go to China, talk to some young people on a college campus, and he then explains to them that they have nothing to fear because we will soon have balanced budgets back in America, and what happens? He gets laughed at. So the dollar today will not be used. Something will replace it. In a group like this, I think we know what we have to do and what we have to replace it with. But the opposition also know what we know, and that is they're working feverishly to replace it as well with something different. What they're working on now, behind the scenes, is to have an international paper standard run by the IMF and the United Nations. The answer to this is, how about legalizing the Constitution? Legalize once again the obligation to use only gold and silver as legal tender. You know, there's a little piece of legislation I worked on for about 30-some years. I can't remember. And I reintroduced it this year with expectation that it would do better, but I had no idea how much better. But lo and behold, this bill that I introduced, it has something to do with auditing and Fed 1207. Co-sponsors, all the Republicans and 104 Democrats are on the bill. The most we ever had before was 18. So there is something going on in this country, and it's not all bad. Now why is auditing Fed important? People ask me, what do you expect to find? Well, I don't know exactly what we'll find, but I do know they don't want to be audited, so I know there's something in there that we need to know about, for sure. The Federal Reserve now is operated in secrecy. It's gotten away with it for years because we were on the upswing of a financial bubble, and in general, people were benefiting by the counterfeiting of money. But now that the truth is known and we can't continue this way, fortunately for us and for our arguments, the people have awakened and they know the Federal Reserve has not been their friend. 75% of the American people now support the auditing of the Federal Reserve System. It's before any of those programs start. They ought to have oversight to prevent them from happening. The Federal Reserve does deal with a lot of companies directly. They could, under today's laws, send billions and billions of dollars to companies like Goldman Sachs, and without approval